Rome seemed to own the world. Her empire stretched from Scotland to the Sahara. Her army controlled 3 continents. 50 million people lived under her laws. Rome's empire was the greatest political prize the world had ever seen. This is the story of those who would do anything to win it. By the beginning of the 1st century BC, the Roman Republic was imploding. Roman values were under siege. Slave revolts stunned Sicily and Italy. Something had to give. The collapsing republic found an unlikely supporter. Born in a wool-dyeing shop in central Italy in 106 BC, Marcus Tullius Cicero dedicated his life to opposing the greed and violence that threatened his world. He was a self-made man, earning a name for himself as an orator and lawyer in Rome, relying on his eloquence and intelligence to outwit wealthier opponents. Cicero believed the key to the Republic's future was in her past. There, Cicero saw the image of Cincinnatus and the ideals of restraint and self-sacrifice he embodied. But there was another role model, Romulus, Rome's legendary founder, who was reared by a savage wolf and killed his own brother in a struggle for power. In legend, greed and treachery were Rome's founding virtues, and they threatened to be the most enduring.
I would rather be the first man in a barbarian village than the second man in Rome. Julius Caesar.
Rome's most notorious citizen was born to wealthy parents in 100 BC. As with all young Roman aristocrats, Julius Caesar had a strong sense of destiny. As a child, he dared to claim he was descended from the goddess Venus. Caesar's first official post was as a military officer in Spain. There, the 30-year-old Caesar stared at a statue of Alexander the Great. How had he achieved nothing, he wept, when at his age, Alexander had conquered the world? Roman politicians had always staged huge spectacles to impress the voters. In 63 BC, Caesar outdid them all. 640 gladiators fought to the death at his first public games. It was an unprecedented display of power.
He was lavish in his spending. He purchased a short-lived fame at great expense. Plutarch.
But Caesar knew there were 2 secrets to gaining power in Rome. One was playing to the people. Commanding a successful army was the other. In 59 BC, Caesar became military commander over Gaul, modern-day France. 9 years later, 1 million Gauls were dead or enslaved. It was a flagrant act of genocide. Caesar would now summon the ghost of Sulla, Rome's first warlord. Like Sulla, Caesar was returning from war with an army loyal to him, not Rome. Like Sulla, Caesar wanted something the Republic could never allow. In January 49 BC, Caesar committed the ultimate act of treachery. Following in Sulla's footsteps, he persuaded a Roman army to cross the Rubicon and march into Rome.
The monstrosity of Caesar's character is concealed in his gay and friendly manner. No one knows what to do. If we resist, there will probably be bloodshed. Cicero.
The Senate quickly chose Pompey, conqueror of the East, to defend the Republic. But Caesar wanted absolute power, even at the price of civil war. Rome's two greatest generals met in Greece.
Brother against brother, eagle against eagle, flag against flag. Citizens, what is this madness? Lucan.
Pompey was no match for Caesar and his brutal fighting force. He fled to Egypt, but was eventually captured by Caesar's spies. The fate of the Republic hung in the balance. But Caesar had other things on his mind. In Egypt, in 48 BC, he met the young Queen of the Nile, Cleopatra. They fell in love and had a child. Cleopatra persuaded Caesar to help her overthrow her brother and gain the throne of Egypt. Then, in 46 BC, she accompanied Caesar back to Rome.
Cleopatra represented for the Romans every threat you can imagine. She was African, a woman, beautiful, she was powerful. You find her seducing Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar, right, who conquered the Gauls, who was this great soldier, who was this politician, who wanted to be the dictator in Rome. Cleopatra reminded them of their vulnerability, and that frightened them very, very much.
Vulnerability was not something Caesar understood. Veni, vidi, vici. I came, I saw, I conquered, was the motto of his dazzling return to the city. That evening, he threw a banquet for 22,000 of Rome's poorest citizens. Hypnotized, the people did the unthinkable. They voluntarily voted Caesar the absolute powers of a dictator. Caesar then shocked everyone. He used his total control not for revenge, but social reform. Like Gracchus, Caesar gave the Roman poor what they wanted. He made sure no Roman citizen ever went hungry. He gave grain to the poor and land to his soldiers, paid for by himself. Caesar, the benign dictator, was incredibly popular. Like Gracchus, he was a little too popular for some.
Here was a man who was desperate to be king of the Roman people, master of the whole world. A man who believes such an ambition to be morally right must be insane. Cicero.
In February 44 BC, he went too far. Caesar asked the people to elect him dictator for life. To accept absolute power forever was an open insult to his Republican peers. Cicero was disgusted and retired from political life in protest. The Senate wasn't so meek. They invited Caesar to explain his actions. It was the Ides of March. By mid-morning, the crisis was over. At the foot of a statue of Pompey lay Caesar's body, stabbed 35 times. Rome's poor were outraged. At Caesar's funeral, they lit torches from the pyre and set fire to the houses of the assassins. That night, a comet blazed across the sky. It seemed an omen. Julius Caesar, the champion of the poor. The citizens of Rome declared him a god. That changed everything. For the poor had made it clear they valued the gifts of a dictator more than the empty promises of a republic.
You could get rid of Caesar, but you couldn't get rid of Caesarism. As Cicero says at one point, it's a strange thing, we've killed the man and confirmed everything that he's done, because you couldn't do away with it. And in fact, those last years after Caesar's murder are not about the destruction of the Republic. The Republic was destroyed by Caesar. It's simply about who's going to replace Caesar.
Two rivals came forward to vie for the dead dictator's absolute power. Octavian, Caesar's 18-year-old son-in-law and heir, and Mark Antony, Caesar's closest friend and ally, no stranger to the politics of intimidation. In 43 BC, Antony raised an army and surrounded the Senate. The Republic was once again under siege. Cicero came out of retirement to attack Antony. He thought Octavian was the Republic's last chance. Cicero confronted Antony in the Senate.
Your ambition to reign is as fierce as Caesar's. I would gladly offer my own body if my death could redeem the freedom of our nation.
Antony took Cicero at his word, and 2 months later, his thugs murdered the Republic's boldest defender. His hands were cut off and put on public display in Rome. Its conscience dead, the Roman Republic was in crisis. In 33 BC, 10 years after the assassination of Julius Caesar, Mark Antony and Octavian were still fighting for control of the Roman world. The ghost of civil war was back. The Roman people were desperate for a change.
The rule of a single man is the only remedy for a country in turmoil. Tacitus.
Octavian finally defeated Antony in 31 BC to become the undisputed ruler of the entire Roman world. But his greatest victory would be one of statesmanship. Octavian was poised to redefine the very meaning of power in Rome. He understood patronage was the secret to control in Roman society. With Rome's vast treasury at his disposal, he set about making every Roman his client, obligated to him, the universal patron. Octavian handed out huge cash bonuses to Rome's army. He now had the undivided loyalty of over 400,000 soldiers. He then played to the people like never before, increasing the grain handout and building huge aqueducts to bring fresh water to Rome's poor. Octavian then focused on the most important ritual of all. He staged the most lavish games Rome had ever seen. Wild beasts and gladiators fought for days in the packed arena. Seduced, the people voted him all the power he asked for. The Roman Senate then stunned everyone. In 27 BC, they allowed Octavian what they had denied Caesar, the constitutional right to absolute power for life. Octavian took the name Augustus, the sacred one. Rome, once a bastion of open government, had willingly become an empire, ruled by a single man. Octavian Augustus had become the Roman Empire's first emperor. "2,000 years later, Benito Mussolini, Rome's last fascist dictator, styled himself on Rome's first emperor in revealing ways. Like Augustus, Mussolini seized power by force. Like Mussolini, Augustus forced a consensus through intimidation. But for the vast majority of people in the Roman Empire, that didn't matter. For them, Augustus was a savior. He offered the peace and stability they had craved for nearly a century. From the Atlantic to the Euphrates, from Spain to Syria, people were free to think about something other than war. It was the Pax Romana, Rome's golden age, the longest period of peace Europe has ever known. Yet the architect of peace would never enjoy his own triumph. For Augustus was obsessed by a question that plagued all Roman emperors. What would happen in Rome when he died? The dilemma of dynastic succession would haunt Augustus for the rest of his life. His marriage to Livia had produced no male heirs. The burden of producing one fell on his young daughter, Julia. Augustus carefully selected her partners. Julia was married first to her cousin, Marcellus, but he died tragically at the age of 19. She was then married to Marcus Agrippa, her father's military advisor. He was 30 years older than her. He died too. Finally, Julia was paired with Tiberius, her own stepbrother. The only thing they shared was a mutual dislike for each other's company. Poor Julia was overwhelmed by the arranged marriages. Inevitably, she looked elsewhere for intimacy. Rome's gossip mongers had a field day.
His daughter was shameless beyond imagination. She had been accessible to scores of lovers. The very forum in which her father had proposed a law against adultery she had chosen for her debauchery. She daily resorted to the life of a whore, selling her favors to even unknown lovers. Seneca.
Augustus was trapped. 10 years earlier, he'd passed draconian laws banning adultery, on punishment of exile or death. the emperor was forced to banish his own daughter to an island off the coast of Italy. Julia was never allowed to return to Rome. The pressures of dynastic succession had claimed its first victim. Rome's first emperor eventually died in 14 AD at the age of 76. He'd ruled Rome peacefully for over 40 years.
I restored, I completed, I built, I gave. Augustus.